It was the second toast of the evening when the room began to blur. The lights from the tree flickered too bright. I set my wine glass down, pretending to laugh at Nolan's story about his boss and the turkey. But my fingers trembled against the linen napkin. "Are you all right?" Mom Claire's voice was light, almost amused. "You always overthink things. Probably just too much excitement." I smiled back, automatic. The dizziness pressed in harder. My heart wasn't racing, it was slowing. I rose from the table, steadying myself with the back of the chair. "Just need a little water," I said, waving off Claire's half-hearted offer to help. In the kitchen, the quiet hit me like a wall. The clinking and laughter faded behind the swinging door. I reached for the cabinet, then paused. Something was wrong. There on the far counter near the paper towels, my insulin vial. It shouldn't have been there. I always kept it in the locked drawer of my bedroom mini fridge. Next to it, a syringe, half full, uncapped. I stared, breath frozen. The vial had been opened. A drop still clung to the metal needle tip. My knees went soft. I grabbed the edge of the sink and forced myself upright. They wouldn't, but they might. I took a step back, grabbed a dish towel, wrapped the syringe, and tucked it into my sweater pocket. I did the same with the vial. My fingers were cold, but my mind had never been clearer. I walked to the hallway, pulled out my phone, and pressed 9, then 1, then again. My thumb hovered. I could hear Claire's laugh from the dining room. Nolan said something I couldn't make out. I lowered the phone. Not yet. Not without proof. I returned to the table with a fresh glass of water, and the same quiet smile they were used to. Claire looked at me. Better I nodded. Much. And that night, while they cleared the dishes, I stayed silent and started watching. 3 years ago, Claire called me crying. They were behind on their mortgage. Nolan had lost his tech job, and the baby was on the way. She said they were scared, said she hated asking, so I offered before she could. I sold my condo, a modest place, but mine, paid off with long night shifts and rationed vacations. I handed her the check at the kitchen table, right where we were now celebrating Christmas. "This is temporary," she'd promised, her hand over mine. "I'll never let anything happen to you, Mom." I moved into their guest room a month later, arriving with boxes of linens, my favorite coffee blend, and every recipe Claire ever loved as a child. I cooked, cleaned, held the baby when she had meetings. They said thank you at first. Then the thank yous grew thinner. Eventually, they vanished altogether. Now my name isn't on the mailbox, not even on the Wi-Fi account. When deliveries come, they're for Claire and Nolan Reynolds. Not even a line for Loretta. 2 weeks ago, Claire knocked on my door and said they were turning the guest room into a yoga studio. "It's really good for my stress," she added, like I was a tenant asking too many questions. I moved into the basement den. No windows. A cot, not a bed. No room for my coffee machine. I didn't argue. I smiled. I told her it was fine. Because once you know you're being used, arguing only teaches them where your limits are. I stayed quiet. Observed more. Noticed things I used to ignore, how they locked the liquor cabinet when guests left, how Nolan always made my tea himself, how Claire kept checking my pill bottles just to help. When you stop being seen as a person and start being managed like an object, you learn to listen differently. That's how I heard them whispering that night, after they thought I was asleep. The next morning, the house was still. Claire had left early for her yoga class. Nolan for the office he mostly used as an excuse to get out of the house. I stood in the kitchen, my hands shaking just enough to betray the calm I was pretending to have. The syringe and vial were exactly where I'd hidden them, tucked into the lining of my old winter coat. I took them out carefully, wrapping each in a plastic sandwich bag. It felt absurd preserving what might have been used to end me, like labeling poison for later study. That's when I saw it, half buried beneath a grocery flyer by the trash. An envelope with my name on it. Loretta Vance. But not in my handwriting. The return address read Providence Mutual Life Insurance. I hadn't had a policy with them in years. My pulse quickened. I tore it open. Inside, a printed form. Policy type term life insurance. Insured Loretta Vance. Beneficiary Claire Reynolds. Amount $1,500,000. The start date was 3 weeks ago. My throat went dry. I reread it twice, hoping I'd imagined it. But there it was, my daughter's name, my life, and a number that now carried the weight of betrayal. I folded the paper, slid it into a file envelope, and tucked it with the syringe and vial. Evidence, not emotion. Emotion had almost killed me once already. The back door creaked open. Nolan stepped in, carrying a bag of groceries and that easy, hollow smile. "Morning, Loretta," he said, setting things on the counter. "You're up early." I smiled back, calm and steady. Old habits. Couldn't sleep. He poured himself coffee, oblivious. The same man who had toasted to family and success now stood beside me, inches from the truth. When he left the room, I exhaled slowly and locked the envelope in my handbag. They thought I was fragile. They thought I was slow. They had no idea the nurse in me had just begun her own investigation. I waited until the house was empty again. Claire wouldn't be back until after lunch, and Nolan had taken the car probably off to one of his long lunches that never matched his credit card bills. I slipped into the downstairs bathroom, locking the door behind me. The vent fan buzzed faintly overhead as I laid the syringe and vial on a folded towel beneath the vanity light. First the vial. It looked like mine, same label, same manufacturer. But when I unsealed the top and brought it to my nose, I knew. Too sharp. Too chemical. I'd handled insulin for decades, my own and patients'. This wasn't it, or at least not pure. Something had been added, something off. Next, the syringe, half full. Still a faint pink tinge at the base, like the residue from something dissolved. I didn't need a lab to tell me this hadn't come from any approved pharmacy. I pricked my finger and checked my glucose. 42. Dangerously low. I should have been on the floor last night. I should have passed out, or worse. But I hadn't taken a full dose. Maybe my body resisted. Maybe God gave me one more breath. Maybe it was muscle memory, decades on night shift adrenaline, overriding exhaustion trauma instincts kicking in before logic could catch up. I breathed slowly, pressed my palms to the sink, and reminded myself, you know how this works. You've seen it before. You've saved people from it. But this time, you're the patient. And the threat it's coming from upstairs. I sealed the syringe and vial in a Ziploc, wiped down everything I touched and flushed the towel just in case. Claire would notice a moved spoon, but miss a missing conscience. I couldn't afford to leave a trace. I unlocked the door, stepped back into the hallway, and moved to the corner chair where I kept my blood pressure cuff. I took a reading, wrote it down. I would document everything, every symptom, every irregularity, every time Nolan offered me something to drink. They'd counted on me being too tired, too trusting, too old. But they'd forgotten one thing. I used to catch people trying to get away with murder for a living. I left the house before dawn, the cold air sharp enough to clear my thoughts. Claire thought I had a routine checkup that morning, and I didn't correct her. I'd made an appointment at a small urgent care clinic 2 towns over, checked in under my friend Margaret's name, and paid in cash. The nurse took my vitals. Then the doctor came in. Young, distracted, polite. He asked about the dizziness, the weakness, the drop in blood sugar. I gave him the short version. When he ordered blood work, I added one quiet request. Please include a toxicology panel. He blinked, but didn't question it. An hour later, he came back holding a clipboard. Mrs. Margaret Wright, we found something unusual. His tone had shifted. Now he sounded careful. You've got traces of a sedative in your blood. A strong one. It's not insulin. It's closer to a barbiturate. I nodded, pretending surprise, but inside, every nerve sharpened. That was the missing piece, the substitute. Whatever they'd given me was meant to look like a diabetic collapse. Clean, silent, believable. I asked for a copy of the test signed under Margaret's name and walked straight to the post office. Inside a rented safety deposit box, I placed the vial syringe and lab report. Then I added the life insurance letter. My evidence was now under lock and key. Back home, the house smelled of perfume and pancakes. Claire greeted me with a smile too wide. "You look better, Mom. I told you it was just the holidays." Nolan slid a mug toward me. "Try this blend? It's decaf." I stared at the coffee, at the sheen on its surface, at the two of them pretending to care. Then I smiled, took a slow sip, and left the mug half full on the counter. That afternoon, while they planned their ski trip, I bought a small recording device online. I placed one under the kitchen table and another in my lamp by the bed. If they were going to treat me like a patient, they'd better remember I was still the nurse taking notes. The invitations went out a week before Christmas. Claire called it a holiday brunch, but I knew it was a performance, another chance to parade the life they couldn't afford. Nolan's colleagues were the kind who measured success by the size of your kitchen island, and Claire loved pretending ours was marble instead of laminate. I offered to help, but she waved me off. "Just relax, Mom. Try not to stress over details." That was her way of saying, stay out of sight. On the morning of the party, I slipped my small purse under the kitchen table, the recorder inside already running. I'd learned long ago that truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be captured. Guests arrived with wine and fake laughter. Claire floated between them in her red dress, perfectly charming. Nolan bragged about a project that didn't exist. I smiled, nodded, and played the part of the quiet, grateful mother. No one noticed the bag beneath the table. By mid-afternoon, the house emptied. Claire and Nolan clinked glasses, exhausted and smug. I excused myself, claiming fatigue, and went downstairs. When the last car pulled out of the driveway, I retrieved the recorder and sat on my bed. I pressed play. Static first. Then Nolan's voice. "She took the dose last night. Claire, good. If she collapses again, it'll look natural." Nolan. "The policy's active. The 30-day clause is up next week. We're in the clear." My stomach clenched. I stopped the tape, then forced myself to rewind and play again. Every word was there, crisp, casual, like a grocery list. No hesitation. No remorse. For a long time, I sat in silence, listening to my own breath between their voices. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was methodical. They thought they were clever, quiet killers playing house. But what they didn't know was that every lie they told had been recorded, time-stamped, and now stored in a safety deposit box with their names all over it. By the next morning, I was done being their victim. I drove to Harold's office the next morning, the recorder in my purse and the policy letter folded neatly beside it. The winter air was sharp, the kind that carried the faint smell of rain and resignation. Harold had been my husband's closest friend, sharp-minded, steady, loyal, even after all these years. If anyone could help me close this chapter cleanly, it was him. He greeted me with that same quiet professionalism that used to calm my husband before a trial. "Loretta," he said, guiding me to the chair across from his desk. "You sounded serious on the phone." I placed the envelope and a small flash drive on the table. "I need you to update my trust. Everything. Today." His brow furrowed as he scanned the documents. "Vance Legacy LLC," he murmured, recognizing the shell company my husband and I built decades ago. "You still have control. Every share," I said. "Property, investments, cash reserves. About $800,000 in total. I want it transferred into a new irrevocable trust." He looked up. "And the beneficiary, a women's shelter in Portland. All of it. But there's a condition." I leaned forward. If I die under suspicious circumstances, anything other than natural causes, the trust activates immediately. Claire and Nolan are to be legally excluded from all claims. He didn't ask for details. He just nodded the way men do when they understand more than they say. Loretta, he said. Finally, you're sure about this? I met his eyes. Completely. My daughter already signed my death certificate in her head. I'm just choosing who gets the inheritance. Harold spent the next hour typing, revising, witnessing my signatures with steady precision. When we finished, he slid the final folder across the table. It's airtight, he said. If anything happens, they'll be left with nothing. I folded my copy, tucked it into my coat, and exhaled for the first time in days. By the time I stepped outside, the rain had started, and I knew exactly what I had to do next. They came just after 9 on a Wednesday morning. 2 unmarked cars, no sirens, no commotion. The officers moved with quiet purpose, calm, but not casual. They had the warrant. I had the truth. I opened the door before they knocked. Claire stood at the kitchen island in a robe, coffee in hand, blinking like she thought it was a mistake. Nolan was upstairs. I heard his footsteps pause when he saw the uniforms. I didn't bother calling out to him. The officers already knew where to go. The lead detective, a woman named Ortiz, asked me gently, "May we begin?" I nodded. Everything is in the guest room closet. Top shelf inside a locked box. The code is 1027. I brought the evidence home early this morning. She found it in minutes. The syringe, the tampered vial, the life insurance policy, the toxicology report under Margaret's name. Claire's voice cracked from behind me. "What is this, Mom? What are you doing?" I turned slowly. She looked smaller than I remembered. "I'm just helping them understand the facts." Nolan came down, then half-dressed and pale. "We didn't do anything. This is insane." Detective Ortiz said nothing. She just held up the recorder I had included with the evidence. "We've reviewed this already. We'll take statements downtown." They didn't arrest them on the spot. That would come later. This visit was about collecting, confirming, tightening the net. I stood on the porch while they worked, watching frost melt off the garden stones. My breath came out in steady clouds. After an hour, Ortiz approached me again. She didn't mince words. "Would you like to press charges?" I didn't speak right away. I didn't need to. I simply nodded once. She nodded back. As the officers finished packing evidence into their vehicles, I looked at the house, the one I'd helped pay for, scrubbed clean, filled with birthday cakes and handmade curtains. It had become something else. A stage, a trap. And by the time I stepped back inside, I knew exactly what to pack first. The call came at 6:43 a.m. I let it ring once before answering. I already knew the number. "Mom? It's me. Please listen." Claire's voice came through thin and urgent. "You misunderstood everything. We were worried about your health. Nolan, he didn't mean I didn't wait for the rest." I hung up. No screaming, no final words, just a soft click and silence. By noon that day, I had packed the last of my belongings into 3 boxes and 2 suitcases. A moving truck came for the rest. I didn't take the photos from the stairwell wall. I didn't take the coffee maker Claire kept claiming was clutter. I took only what was mine, what had always been mine. The cottage sat just outside town, tucked between 2 birch trees and a gravel road that no one rushed down. 1 bedroom, a porch swing, and a tiny garden that looked like it could be revived come spring. I signed the lease under my name alone. My new neighbors call me Miss Vance. They bring fresh muffins, help carry groceries, and ask if I like black coffee. They don't ask about Christmas. They don't ask about daughters or holidays or why I moved in midwinter. And I don't tell them. I don't speak of the house where my name had once been on the deed, but never on the mailbox. I don't tell them about the brunch, the recorder, or the soft click of a phone call that ended years of denial. I don't tell them that for the first time in my life I sleep with the door unlocked, Not because I'm careless, but because I no longer share walls with people who smile while setting traps. I hung my late husband's photo above the fireplace. I unpacked the blanket my mother crocheted 40 years ago, and I set one plate on the table not for loneliness, but for peace. By the end of the week, I'd already forgotten the sound of Claire's voice, but I remembered the strength in my own. The light filters through the kitchen window at the same soft angle it always does, gentle, golden, patient. I sit at the table with my journal and a warm cup of coffee, the scent of cinnamon still lingering in the air from the muffins I baked yesterday. 6 months. That's how long it's been since I last saw Claire's face, or heard Nolan's footsteps echoing down that hallway. 6 months since I left behind the house, the guest room, the locked cabinets, and the fear I once convinced myself was just aging. Here I don't flinch when the phone rings. I don't double-check my pill bottles. I don't pretend not to notice when someone watches me too closely. Here, I just live. The cottage creaks in places, but it's a kind creak. The kind that says I'm still standing. There's no marble countertop, no big screen TV, no second fridge stocked with wine for guests who only come to take. Just shelves with books, a chair that knows the shape of my spine, and a porch that catches the first light of every new day. I open the envelope that came in the morning mail. The letter is typed formal, but sincere. Dear Ms. Vance, thanks to your generous trust contribution, we've been able to house and support 6 women fleeing domestic violence. Your legacy is changing lives. Portland Women's Refuge. I hold the letter for a long time. 6 women. 6 lives safe and starting over because I chose a different ending for mine. I fold the letter and place it next to my journal. Outside, a robin lands on the windowsill. The world keeps moving. Quietly. Gently. No shouting. No pretending. No schemes. Just the sound of the kettle. The scent of cinnamon and the warmth of a home that no one will ever take from me again. Sometimes the best revenge is waking up alive and knowing they'll never touch your peace again.